3 days had passed since the human ambassador walked out of the council chamber, and still no one knew what to do. The great crystal halls that usually echoed with formal debates now buzzed with nervous whispers and frightened conversations. Representatives who had not spoken to each other in decades were suddenly meeting in secret corners, discussing what the humans might be planning. The emergency planning room was hidden deep inside the council building, where only the highest-ranking officials were allowed to enter. The walls were black metal covered with screens showing star maps and military data. The air smelled like ozone from all the electronic equipment working at full power. Chancellor Kethel paced back and forth in front of a massive holographic display that showed all known human territory. His blue skin had grown pale over the past 3 days, and his white eyes kept darting between different sections of the star map. 17 systems, he muttered to himself as he walked 17 systems against 47 species. How can they be so confident? Around the oval table in the center of the room sat the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Admiral Krixtar of the warrior caste was there. His red-scaled body, covered in battle armor that had scars from 100 different wars. His yellow eyes glowed with anger as he stared at the human worlds on the display. Intelligence Director Yu Jin sat across from him, her small human frame looking tiny compared to the alien warriors around her. She had left Earth 30 years ago when she was just 20 years old to work for the Council. Her black hair was now streaked with gray, and her face showed the stress of the past few days. "Tell us again what you think they are doing, Yu Jin," the Chancellor said, stopping his pacing to look at her. The human woman took a deep breath before speaking. She had been the Council's expert on human psychology for over 2 decades, but now she felt like she understood her own people less than ever. "Humans do not bluff," she said slowly. "When they make a decision like walking away from negotiations, they have already thought about every possible result. They are not the type to make empty threats or take foolish risks. Then they are insane." Admiral Krixtar growled, his deep voice rumbling like an earthquake. 17 systems cannot fight the combined might of the entire Council. We have over 3,000 star systems under our control and military fleets that could glass their worlds in days. Jin shook her head. "That is what worries me," she said. "Humans are not insane. They are very good at math. They know exactly how many ships you have and how many they have. If they chose to reject the Council anyway, it means they believe they can win." The room fell silent as everyone considered this possibility. It was true that humans had a reputation for being excellent at warfare, despite their relatively small territory. They had won every conflict they had ever been involved in, often against much larger forces. But the numbers were so overwhelming that victory seemed impossible. Economic advisor Lin Su, a tall, thin alien with green skin and 4 arms, pulled up trade statistics on her personal screen. She had been monitoring human economic activity since the crisis began, and what she found was deeply troubling. "Look at this," she said, projecting her data onto the main display. "For the past 6 months, humans have been stockpiling rare metals and energy crystals. They have cut off all exports to Council worlds and have been buying massive amounts of raw materials from neutral systems." Chancellor Kethel studied the numbers with growing alarm. "How did we miss this?" "Because we were not looking for it," Linsu replied. "We assumed they were just expanding their normal trade operations, but now I can see the pattern. They have been preparing for economic isolation. They do not need our trade networks anymore." This revelation sent a chill through the room. Every species in the Council depended on trade with other worlds for survival. Even the most advanced civilizations needed resources they could not produce themselves. But if humans had found a way to become completely self-sufficient, it meant traditional economic pressure would be useless against them. Admiral Krixtar slammed his armored fist on the table, making the metal ring like a bell. "Then we use military force," he snarled. "We cannot allow one species to ignore Council authority. If we let humans get away with this, others will follow their example." But Yu Jin was shaking her head again. "You still do not understand," she said. "Humans do not just prepare for one possibility. They plan for everything. If they were willing to cut themselves off from the galaxy, it means they have already figured out how to survive whatever we might do to them. The Admiral leaned forward, his yellow eyes narrowing. What are you saying? I am saying that maybe we should be asking why they felt they needed to prepare for this. The human woman looked around the table at all the alien faces. Maybe the question is not how we can force them back into the council. Maybe we should be asking what they know that we do not. Security Chief Dongsu, a quiet alien with silver skin who rarely spoke in meetings, suddenly cleared his throat. When he had everyone's attention, he activated a new display showing shipping records and exploration reports. I have been reviewing human exploration data from the past century, he said in his soft voice. Most of their expansion has been toward the outer rim of the galaxy, far from the major trade routes and established systems. We assumed they were just looking for new worlds to colonize. He paused and highlighted several star systems on the map, but some of their exploration ships never reported back. We assumed they were lost to space pirates or natural disasters. Now I wonder if they found something else. Something like what? The Chancellor asked. Dongsu shrugged, his thin shoulders. I do not know. But humans have been sending more and more ships to the outer rim every year. They have built supply stations and communication relays in areas where there should be nothing worth protecting. Yujin felt a cold knot forming in her stomach as she listened. She knew how human minds worked, and this pattern was familiar. They were building infrastructure for a reason. Humans did not waste resources on projects that served no purpose. What if, she said slowly, they encountered something out there? Something that made them realize the Council was not as powerful as we think we are. The room went quiet again, but this time, the silence felt different. It was not the silence of confusion, but the silence of growing fear. Each alien around the table was beginning to understand that they might not be dealing with a rebellious species that needed to be punished. They might be dealing with a species that was trying to protect them from something they did not even know existed. Admiral Crickstar's voice was quieter when he spoke again. You think they found a threat? I think they found something that scared them enough to spend decades preparing for war while pretending to be peaceful colonists. Yujin replied. And if something can scare humans enough to make them abandon diplomacy, then maybe we should be scared too. Chancellor Kethel stopped pacing and stared at the star map showing human territory. Suddenly, 17 systems did not look like a small rebellious territory. It looked like a fortress wall built between the council worlds and whatever lay beyond in the dark, empty spaces between the stars. What do we do? He asked. But his voice was barely above a whisper. Yujin stood up from her chair and walked to the display. She pointed to the outer rim where human ships had been exploring. We find out what they found, she said. And we pray that they are still willing to protect us from it. The meeting ended with more questions than answers, but one thing was becoming clear. The humans had not abandoned the council out of arrogance. They had abandoned it because they were preparing for something much worse than political negotiations. The real question was whether the council would figure out what that something was before it was too late. The Great Hall of the Galaxy Council was bigger than most cities on Earth. The walls were made of shining crystal that reflected light from 3 different suns. The floor was smooth white stone that had been polished for thousands of years. Representatives from 47 different alien species sat in rows of seats that curved around the center of the room. In the middle of this massive space stood one human man. His name was Taimin, and he wore a simple black suit that looked very plain compared to the colorful robes and armor worn by the aliens around him. His hair was starting to turn gray at the sides, and his face was calm. He did not look worried or scared, even though he was surrounded by creatures that could destroy his entire planet with a single command. The leader of the council was a tall, blue-skinned alien called Chancellor Kethel. His skin sparkled like tiny diamonds were mixed into it, and his eyes were completely white with no pupils. He held a long staff made of crystal that hummed with energy. When he spoke, his voice echoed through the entire hall, making the air vibrate. Ambassador Taimin, the Chancellor, said in a voice that sounded like thunder rolling across mountains. Your species has been brought before this council to answer serious charges. The Insectoid Collective has filed a complaint against humanity. They say you have destroyed 3 of their breeding colonies in the Kepler sector without permission. The insect aliens in question were sitting in a special section of the hall designed for their kind. They looked like giant ants, but walked on 2 legs and had 4 arms. Their leader was clicking his mandibles together, making angry, chittering sounds. His compound eyes reflected the light as he stared at the human. Taemin nodded slowly. Yes, we are aware of what they claim, he said. His voice was steady and showed no fear at all. The Chancellor raised his staff higher. Do you deny these charges? No. Taemin replied simply. We do not deny them. Wave of shocked whispers ran through the hall. Many aliens had never heard a species admit to breaking council law so openly. The 6-armed hegemony representative named Vorth leaned forward in his seat. His purple skin darkened with surprise. Then, you understand the seriousness of this situation? The Chancellor continued. According to Galactic Law Section 4.7 Alpha, you must submit to our mediation process. A neutral panel will decide if you must pay damages or face other punishment. This is how we have kept peace in the galaxy for over 300 years. Taemin was quiet for a long moment. He looked around the hall at all the different aliens. Some had tentacles instead of arms. Others had scales or fur or skin that changed colors. Many had more eyes than humans or different shapes entirely, but they all had one thing in common. They were all staring at him, waiting for his answer. Finally, the human ambassador smiled. It was not a mean smile or a scared smile. It was the kind of smile someone makes when they know something others do not. No, he said clearly. The single word hit the hall like a bomb exploding. Every alien representative sat up straighter. Many started talking at once in languages that sounded like music, or grinding metal or ocean waves. The Chancellor struck his staff on the floor 3 times and the noise stopped. What did you say? The blue alien demanded. Taemin turned to face him directly. Humanity declines to participate in your mediation process. We withdraw from all Galaxy Council proceedings effective immediately. We will handle our own affairs from this point forward. The silence that followed was so complete that many aliens wondered if they had gone deaf. The idea of refusing council, mediation was so unthinkable that no one had ever written laws about what to do if it happened. You cannot simply refuse, the Chancellor said, but his voice was not as strong as before. This is not how things work. Every species in the galaxy follows these rules. Taemin shrugged his shoulders in a very human gesture. The rules work for you, he said. They do not work for us. We choose not to follow them anymore, but the consequences. Vorth shouted, jumping up from his seat, his 6 arms waving wildly. The Council has 46 other species allied against you. Do you think 17 human star systems can stand against all of us? The human looked at the 6-armed alien with interest. 17 systems, he repeated. That is what you think we have, something. In the way he said it made several aliens shift uncomfortably in their seats. Ambassador Taemin said, a female voice from the crowd. It was Yujin, a human who had left Earth decades ago to work for the Council. She had pale skin and short black hair and wore the silver robes of a Council intelligence officer. Please reconsider this decision. Your people cannot survive alone in the galaxy. There are too many dangers. Taemin looked at her with something that might have been pity in his eyes. Yujin, he said softly. You have been away from Earth for a very long time. You do not know what humanity has become. The Chancellor struck his staff again. The sound rang through the hall like a bell. What are you saying, human? Do you threaten us? Make no threats, Taemin replied. I simply tell you that we choose our own path now. We will not sit in your courts and argue about colonies that needed to be evacuated. We will not explain our actions to beings who do not understand the dangers. We face evacuated, shouted the insect leader. Those were our breeding worlds. You destroyed millions of our young. They were already dead. Taemin said quietly, and for the first time, his calm mask slipped, showing something harder underneath. You just did not know it yet. Before anyone could ask what he meant, the human ambassador turned and began walking toward the exit. His footsteps echoed in the silent hall. Each step seemed to make the aliens more nervous. Wait, The Chancellor called out, "You cannot simply leave. We have not dismissed you." Taemin stopped at the great doors and looked back over his shoulder. "Chancellor," he said, "I am not asking for your permission." Then he pushed open the massive doors and walked out. The sound of them closing behind him was like the final note of a sad song. For several minutes no one spoke. The aliens looked at each other with confusion and growing fear. They had expected the humans to beg for mercy, or at least try to explain themselves. Instead, they had been told that their entire system of government was being ignored. Finally, Vorth broke the silence. "What do we do now?" he asked. The Chancellor gripped his staff so tightly, his knuckles turned white. "We call an emergency session." He said all species must be warned humanity has declared itself outside galactic law. But even as he said it, the blue alien wondered if they were already too late. The way the human had smiled when talking about 17 systems suggested there was much more to this story, and the comment about evacuation and death made his skin crawl with worry. What did the humans know that the Council did not? The question would haunt every alien in that hall for the days to come. Deep beneath the main Council building, in a section that most beings never knew existed, was the classified archives vault. The walls were lined with data storage units that contained the most secret information in the galaxy. The room was kept cold and dark, with only small blue lights to guide visitors through the narrow walkways between towering shelves of encrypted files. Analyst Sora had been working in this vault for 8 years, but she had never seen files as heavily protected as the ones she was trying to access now. Her fingers moved quickly across the holographic keyboard as she entered one security code after another. Each level of protection she broke through revealed even more restricted information. Sora was young, for someone with such high clearance, only 26 years old. But she had earned her position by being the best codebreaker the Council had ever employed. Her small frame was bent over the glowing screen as she worked, and her long black hair fell across her face, hiding her expression of growing confusion. The files she was looking for were supposed to contain basic information about human military capabilities. It should have been routine research to help the Council understand what they were dealing with. But as she dug deeper into the classified databases, she began to find things that made no sense. According to the official records, humans controlled 17 star systems and had a modest fleet of exploration and defense ships. But the encrypted files she was accessing told a completely different story. Hidden deep in the archives were exploration logs that dated back over a century, showing human ships traveling to regions of space that the Council had never even detected. "This cannot be right," she whispered to herself as she stared at the data on her screen. The records showed hundreds of star systems, not 17 systems that were so far from Council space that their light had not yet reached the core worlds. Systems that should have been empty according to every survey the Council had ever conducted. But the human logs showed established colonies, mining operations, and something else that made Sora blood run cold: military installations. Lots of them, opened file after file, each one revealing more of the truth that had been hidden from the Council for decades. Humans had not been the small, peaceful species everyone believed them to be. They had been quietly building the largest space empire in the galaxy while pretending to be content with their tiny corner of known space. But even that discovery was not the most terrifying thing in the files. Sora's hands began to shake as she accessed a series of reports labeled with codes she had never seen before. The classification level was so high that she wondered if she was the first person besides humans to ever read them. The first file she opened was titled, "First Contact Outer Rim Sector, 7739. The report was written by a human ship, captain named Minho, and dated 87 years ago. His description of what he found in the empty space beyond the galaxy edge made Sora's stomach twist with fear. "We encountered them at the edge of system designation, OR 7739, the report began. They appeared without warning, emerging from what we initially thought was empty space. Their ships are unlike anything in our databases, massive beyond comprehension and clearly designed for one-purpose consumption." Sora scrolled down, reading Captain Minho detailed account of humanity. First encounter with something he called the Devourers. The description painted a picture of creatures that traveled through space in ships the size of moons, systematically destroying every form of life they encountered. They do not negotiate, Minho had written. They do not communicate. They simply consume everything. Planets are stripped down to their cores. Stars are somehow drained of their energy, leaving behind dead husks. Entire star systems become empty voids within months of their arrival. The analyst felt sick as she continued reading. The report described a running battle that lasted for weeks as human ships tried to escape the creatures. Human casualties were massive, but a few ships managed to get away and warn Earth about what was coming. Sora opened more files and found 87 years' worth of human preparation for a war the Council had never known was coming. The 17 systems the Council knew about were just the tip of an iceberg. Humans had built a massive defensive network spanning hundreds of worlds, all designed to stop the Devourers from reaching the inner galaxy. Ship construction reports showed vessels larger than anything the Council had ever built. Weapons, research that made their most advanced technology look like stone tools, and most disturbing of all, records of battles that had already been fought. The humans had not been ignoring Council law out of stubbornness. They had been fighting and dying to protect everyone while the Council argued about trade disputes and territorial boundaries. Sora found combat reports from the past decade showing 3 major battles between human forces and the Devourers. Each battle had cost thousands of human lives but had succeeded in slowing the creatures' advance. The most recent report was dated just 6 months ago. Battle of Kepler Station. The file was labeled. Sora opened it with trembling fingers and found Captain Sung Min, detailed account of humanity, most recent encounter with the enemy. They are adapting faster than we anticipated, the report stated. Our conventional weapons are becoming less effective with each engagement. Admiral Ji Ho estimates we have 18 months before they break through our outer defenses. The evacuation of the Kepler colonies was successful, but we lost 3 battlecruisers and over 4,000 personnel. Sora suddenly understood what Ambassador Taemin had meant when he told the insect representative that their breeding colonies were already dead. The humans had not destroyed them. They had evacuated them before the Devourers could consume every living thing in those systems. She kept reading and found more disturbing information. The Devourers were not just randomly wandering through space. They were following a pattern, moving steadily toward the center of the galaxy, where all the Council worlds were located. The files contained projections and battle plans that showed the creatures would reach the inner systems within 2 years. Human military strategists had calculated that even with their advanced preparations, they could only slow the enemy down, not stop them completely. But there was one more file that changed everything. Sora opened a document titled Alliance Protocols and found communication logs between humans and species she had never heard of, beings from the Outer Rim who had also encountered the Devourers and had been working with humanity to build defenses. Humans were not fighting alone. They had spent decades building alliances with civilizations that the Council did not even know existed, species that had technology and knowledge that could help in the coming war. As she read through the Alliance records, Sora began to understand the full scope of what humanity had accomplished. While the Council had been focused on their small corner of the galaxy, humans had been building a coalition that spanned regions of space no Council ship had ever explored. They had not withdrawn from negotiations because they were arrogant. They had withdrawn because they were trying to save everyone, and the Council political games were wasting precious time. Sora leaned back in her chair as the full truth hit her. Humanity was not the problem. The Council was the problem. Every day they spent arguing about minor territorial disputes was a day that could have been spent preparing for the real threat. She looked at the chronometer on her screen and felt her heart skip a beat. According to the most recent intelligence reports, the Devourers' main force would break through human defenses in less than 18 months. After that, it would take them perhaps 6 more months to reach the first Council worlds. The galaxy had less than 2 years to prepare for a war it did not even know was coming. Sora gathered the most important files and began copying them to a secure data chip. Her hands were still shaking, but now it was from urgency rather than fear. The Council needed to know the truth immediately. As she worked, she wondered if it was already too late. The humans had been preparing for this war for nearly a century, and they were still not confident they could win. How could the Council possibly get ready in time, but she had to try. The alternative was the extinction of every species in the galaxy. When the data transfer was complete, Sora stood up from her workstation and headed for the exit. She had to get this information to Chancellor Kethel immediately. The Council needed to know that their biggest problem was not dealing with rebellious humans. Their biggest problem was convincing the humans to save them. The emergency council session was unlike anything that had ever happened in galactic history. Every single species representative was present in the Great Crystal Hall, even those who had not attended regular meetings for decades. Some had traveled for days through hyperspace to get there after receiving the urgent summons. Others had sent their most important leaders instead of their usual ambassadors. The massive chamber was packed with beings from every corner of the galaxy. The Insectoid Collective had sent their Queen Mother herself, a creature so important that she had not left her homeworld in over 50 years. The warrior caste was represented by their supreme commander, while the peaceful meditative order had sent their highest ranking monk. All of them were staring at the small human woman standing in the center of the hall. Sora had never spoken to such a large audience before, and she could feel her heart beating so fast it felt like it might burst from her chest. But the information she carried was too important for fear to stop her. She held the data chip containing the classified files in her trembling hand and looked up at the screens that surrounded the chamber chancellor. Kethel struck his crystal staff against the floor 3 times to call for silence. His blue skin had grown even paler over the past few hours since Sora had brought him the devastating news. The weight of what they were about to learn had already begun to show on his face. Members of the Council. He began, his voice echoing through the hall. What you are about to see will change everything we thought we knew about our place in the galaxy. Analyst Sora has discovered information that has been hidden from us for nearly a century. Information that explains why humanity withdrew from our negotiations. Sora stepped forward and activated the first holographic display. Images filled the air above the assembled representatives, showing star maps that extended far beyond any territory the Council had ever explored. The scope of space shown was so vast that many aliens gasped in surprise. These are human exploration records dating back 87 years. Sora said, her voice growing stronger as she spoke. They show territories that we never knew existed. Hundreds of star systems that humans have been secretly colonizing, while we believed they controlled only 17 worlds. Murmurs of shock and confusion rippled through the crowd. Several representatives stood up from their seats to get a better look at the displays. The sheer scale of human expansion was staggering. But that is not the most important discovery. Sora continued. She activated another series of images, and the murmuring stopped completely. The new displays showed something that made every being in the hall feel cold with terror. These creatures are called the Devourers. Sora announced as images of massive ships and destroyed solar systems filled the screens. They are a nomadic species that consumes entire star systems, leaving nothing behind but empty space. They strip planets of all resources, both organic and metallic, until nothing remains. The images were horrifying. Dead worlds reduced to cosmic dust, stars that had been somehow drained of their energy, leaving behind cold, dark husks. Space where entire solar systems had once existed, now containing nothing but debris and emptiness. Admiral Crix Tar was the first to find his voice. How long have the humans known about this threat? He demanded, his yellow eyes fixed on the screens showing the destruction. 87 years, Sora replied. That is when they first encountered Devourer scouts in the Outer Rim. Every human expansion we have complained about, every military buildup we have questioned, has been preparation for this war, Chancellor. Kethel leaned forward in his throne, his white eyes wide with disbelief. Are you saying that while we have been arguing about terraforming rights and trade agreements, the humans have been building defenses to protect the entire galaxy? Yes, Sora said simply, and not just building defenses, they have been fighting them. She activated new files showing battle reports and casualty lists. The numbers were staggering. Thousands of human ships destroyed, hundreds of thousands of soldiers killed. Entire colonies evacuated before the Devourers could reach them. 3 major battles in the last decade alone. Sora continued. The humans have been bleeding and dying to buy us time while we threatened them with economic sanctions. The hall erupted in chaos. Some species representatives were shouting questions. Others were demanding to see more evidence. A few sat in stunned silence as the implications of what they were learning began to sink in. The Queen Mother of the Insectoid Collective rose from her special platform. Her massive form towered over the other representatives, and when she spoke, her voice buzzed with harmonics that made the air vibrate. "You are telling us that the breeding colonies we accused humans of destroying Sora nodded. Before the Queen could finish her question, they were evacuated. The humans saved your offspring before the devourers could consume them." The Queen Mother compound eyes reflected the holographic displays as she processed this information. Her entire species had nearly declared war on humanity for what they thought was genocide. Now she learned it had actually been a rescue security chief. Dong-Su activated his own display, showing recent intelligence reports. According to these files, the Devourer's main force will break through human outer defenses in 18 months. After that, they will reach the first Council worlds in approximately 6 additional months. The timeline hit the assembled representatives like a physical blow. Less than 2 years to prepare for a war they had not even known existed. Economic advisor Lin Su stood up from her seat, her forearms shaking as she spoke. "The resource stockpiling we detected, the trade embargo with Council worlds. They were not preparing to fight us, they were preparing to fight for us, so Ra activated the final set of files. These show human alliance agreements with species from the Outer Rim, civilizations that we never knew existed who have also encountered the Devourers and have been working with humanity to build defenses. The scope of human diplomacy was revealed to be as vast as their military preparations. They had spent decades building coalitions and sharing technology with dozens of species that the Council had never even detected, all while we accused them of being isolationist and aggressive." Admiral Krikstar said quietly, his warrior pride clearly shaken. Chancellor Kethel stood up from his throne and walked to the center of the hall where Sora was standing. The crystal staff in his hand seemed heavier than usual as he moved. "How many battles have they fought?" he asked. 17 major engagements over the past decade," Sora replied. "Hundreds of smaller skirmishes. They estimate they have slowed the Devourer advance by nearly 30 years. 30 years that we wasted arguing about minor territorial disputes," the Chancellor said, his voice filled with shame. The hall was quiet now as every representative began to understand the true scope of their failure. While they had been focused on petty politics and small conflicts, humanity had been fighting the greatest war in galactic history, and they had been winning at least enough to keep everyone else alive. But the most sobering realization was yet to come. Intelligence Director Yu Jin, who had been silent throughout the presentation, finally spoke. "If the humans have been preparing for nearly a century, and they are still not confident they can win this war, how can we possibly help them now?" The question hung in the air like a death sentence. The math was simple and terrifying. The Devourers had been advancing steadily despite human resistance. Even with their vast preparations and advanced technology, humanity was fighting a losing battle. The Council, with their outdated fleets and inexperience against this enemy, would be little more than a speed bump in the Devourer's path. But Sora had one more file to show. The most important one of all. "There is something else," she said, activating a final display. "This shows projected battle outcomes if the Council species contribute their full military and industrial capacity to the war effort." The projections were still grim, but they showed something that had not existed before Hope Combined Council. And human forces might be able to stop the Devourer advance. The display showed. Casualty estimates were still enormous, but victory was possible if every species committed everything. They had Chancellor Kethel looked around the hall at the faces of representatives from 47 different species. All of them were staring at the projections, all of them understanding what was being asked of them. "We must vote," he announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the chamber, "all in favor of placing our military forces under human command and committing our full resources to this war." For the first time in Council history, the vote was unanimous. Every hand, claw, tentacle, and appendage rose in agreement. There was no debate, no discussion, no requests for committee meetings. The reality of extinction had a way of making political differences seem very small as the vote was recorded. Sora felt a mixture of relief and terror. They had finally understood the truth, but she wondered if it was already too late. The humans had been fighting this war alone for decades. Now they would have help. But would it be enough to save them all? 1 week after the emergency council session that changed galactic history, Ambassador Taemin returned to the Great Crystal Hall. But this time he was not alone. Behind him walked a figure that made even the bravest warrior species shift nervously. In their seats, Admiral Ji-ho was a legend among humans, and now the council representatives understood why she was tall for a human woman. With silver streaks running through her black hair that had been pulled back in a severe military style, her left eye had been replaced with a cybernetic implant that glowed softly blue, while her right eye was dark and intense. The scars on her face and hands told the story of countless battles fought in the dark spaces between the stars. She wore the black uniform of the Human Defense Force with medals and ribbons that no council member could identify, but everyone could sense their importance. This was not a diplomat or a politician. This was a warrior who had spent decades fighting an enemy the council was only now learning about. The admiral walked with the confident stride of someone who had commanded fleets in battle and had never retreated even when facing impossible odds. Her cybernetic eye scanned the assembled representatives, as if she was assessing their military value and finding most of them lacking. Chancellor Kethel stood up from his throne as the two humans approached the center of the hall. His crystal staff felt heavier than usual in his hands, and his blue skin had taken on an almost gray tinge from the stress of the past week. Ambassador Taemin, he said, his voice carrying across the silent chamber. We received your message that you were willing to return for new negotiations. We are grateful that you have chosen to give us another chance. Taemin smiled, the same calm expression he had worn when he first rejected the council mediation. We are here to listen to your proposal, Chancellor. But I want to be very clear about something. We are not here to negotiate. We are here to accept your surrender. The word surrender hit the assembled aliens like a physical blow. Several representatives started to protest, but Admiral Ji-ho stepped forward, and her presence alone was enough to silence them. For 87 years she began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had commanded in desperate battles. Humanity has been fighting to protect this galaxy. We have lost over 2 million soldiers in that time. We have evacuated countless worlds and species without asking for thanks or recognition. We have built the largest military force in galactic history. While you argued about trade routes, she activated a holographic display that showed the current military situation. The scope of human preparations was even more vast than the Council had realized, defensive lines that stretched across hundreds of star systems. Fleets of warships larger than anything in Council space weapons and technology that made their most advanced equipment look primitive, but we are tired of fighting alone. Admiral Ji-ho continued. The Devourers will break through our outer defenses in 17 months and 4 days. When that happens, they will sweep through Council space like a plague, consuming everything in their path. She paused and looked around the chamber, making eye contact with as many representatives as possible. You have a choice. You can place yourselves under human military command and contribute everything you have to this war. Or you can face the Devourers with your outdated fleets and see how long you last. Admiral Krikstar of the warrior caste stood up, his red scales darkening with what might have been shame or anger. You speak as if we are children who need protection. We have fought wars for thousands of years. Admiral Ji-ho turned to face him directly, her cybernetic eye focusing on the alien warrior. Have you ever fought an enemy that consumes planets? Have you ever commanded a fleet action against ships the size of moons? Have you ever had to evacuate an entire star system because staying to fight would mean the extinction of every living thing in it? The red-scaled warrior opened his mouth to reply, but no words came out. I have, the human admiral continued, have done all of those things dozens of times. I have watched good soldiers die buying time for evacuations. I have made the choice to sacrifice entire fleets, to slow the enemy advance by just a few days. I have seen what happens to worlds that the Devourers reach. She activated new images on the display showing the aftermath of Devourer attacks. The destruction was total and absolute. Nothing remained but empty space where entire civilizations had once existed. This is what you are facing, Admiral Jiho said. This is what humanity has been protecting you from while you complained about our territorial expansion. Chancellor Kethel found his voice. We understand now. We voted unanimously to place our forces under your command. We want to help. The human admiral studied him for a long moment as if trying to decide whether he was sincere. Help? She repeated. You want to help? She activated another display showing detailed military analysis and resource projections. The numbers were staggering in their complexity. But the conclusion was clear. Your combined fleets represent approximately 8% of the military force we estimate will be needed to stop the Devourers. Your industrial capacity might add another 12% to our production capabilities. Your species have no experience fighting this enemy, and it will take months to train your forces to minimum effectiveness. The harsh assessment of Council military capabilities was devastating, but Admiral Jiho was not finished. But Jiho continued. There is something you can provide that we need. Your numbers. We have been fighting with human forces alone for too long. Our population cannot sustain the casualties much longer. We need bodies, and we need them now. Economic. Advisor Linsu raised one of her forearms. Admiral, what exactly are you asking of us? Every military-age member of every species in the Council. Admiral Jiho replied without hesitation. Total conscription. Total industrial conversion to war production. Every resource, every ship, every weapon you have. This is not a conflict where you can contribute a small force and hope for the best. This is a war for the survival of all life in the galaxy. The scope of what she was demanding was enormous. It meant transforming every peaceful civilization into a military machine. It meant sending billions of beings to fight an enemy they had never seen against odds that even humans were not confident they could overcome. Intelligence Director Eugene, who had been silent throughout the exchange, finally spoke Admiral Jiho with respect. What assurance can you give us that this plan will work? The human admiral turned to look at her fellow human, who had spent decades working for the Council. There was something like pity in her expression. None, she said simply. I can give you no assurance of victory. I can only tell you that without total commitment from every species in this galaxy, we will certainly lose. She paused and looked around the chamber one more time. The Devourers do not negotiate. They do not show mercy. They do not take prisoners. They consume everything and everyone in their path. The only choice is to fight them with everything we have, or watch the galaxy die. Ambassador Timon stepped forward to stand beside the Admiral. The Council has 18 hours to make their decision, he announced. If you choose to follow human leadership in this war, we will begin immediate integration of your forces. If you choose to handle this threat on your own. He shrugged in the casual human gesture that had become so familiar to the Council representatives. Then we wish you luck. You will need it. The two humans turned and began walking toward the exit, leaving behind a chamber full of aliens, who finally understood the true scope of the choice before them: follow humanity into the most desperate war in galactic history, or face extinction alone. For beings who had spent centuries believing they were the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy, it was a humbling moment, but as they watched the scarred human admiral walk away, they realized that sometimes survival required abandoning pride and following those who had already proven they were willing to die for others. The vote, when it came, was once again unanimous. The galaxy would follow humanity into war because they finally understood what humans had known all along. Sometimes the only way to save everything you love is to risk everything you have.